What a privilege for me to be in a room with so many change makers, so many agents of change. And how important your work is today. I've been sitting in the audience just this afternoon listening to issues of fentanyl, mental health, gun violence. There are so many public health issues that we all need to address. And what I want to focus on today is to give you a few tools to help you along with this journey. The art of inclusive communication, some communication skills, and also a holistic approach to addressing these very challenging issues. This is the 40th anniversary of the National Conflict Resolution Center. I'm the president of this center, and as the president in the past 20 years, I've never experienced this heightened level of polarization, of systemic unrest, of dysfunction, the toxicity. I mean, we all feel that level of incivility as we just go out around our neighborhood. Well, our organization for 40 years has been providing the cultural, communication, and conflict resolution skills at all levels of society, in families, in communities, in neighborhoods, workplaces, government agencies. And there's no more important time in our society to have these sets of tools. Just think about it. Just 2 years ago, the George Floyd tragedy, that divided our country. Black lives matter, all lives matter, pro-police, anti-police. We became divided as a society. Not that long ago, January 6th, the level of political polarization for a group of people, a mob to attack the nation's capital, that's never happened in our history at this level. I don't know how many of you traveled this past Christmas, over the holiday break, but the airports were an absolute mess. With the issues around Southwest Airlines, people were so frustrated that they were attacking agents at the airport. You talk about turbulence in the air, there was turbulence at the airport. And this type of public incivility, we're seeing that across society. We're seeing that at public school board meetings. We're seeing that at city council meetings. Some reason people feel like they can just yell out and attack. Who would think that public health would be at the center of this incivility? Every year at the National Conflict Resolution Center, we give an award called the National Peacemaker Award. And we honor individuals who have thought outside the box, individuals who have done something different to try to create more peace in our society. Dr. Anthony Fauci represents an individual who thinks outside the box. He's someone who worked across many different administrations, both Democratic and Republican. So he's someone who puts country before party. If you remember, during the pandemic, he was also under attack. Not just himself, but also his family members. So he's an individual that put himself at harm's risk. So individuals like him in public health are under fire. And during that night when he gave his keynote address, he said something that was very interesting. It was a lesson that I'll never forget. He told a story about when he started as a public official in public health in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. And during the AIDS epidemic, gay men, intravenous drug users, they felt like they were under attack. They felt like they were discriminated against. They felt like the government didn't care about them. So in a situation like that, many people would run away from that type of anger, that type of frustration. Not Dr. Fauci. What he did is he entered into a listening campaign. He actually went around the country and met with AIDS patients in cities across the United States. He listened to their issues. He put himself in their shoes. And listening is really the fundamental bedrock of the art of inclusive communication. I'm going to circle back to that in a moment. These types of communication skills and the holistic approach to addressing public issues is more critical at this moment than ever before, given the societal context of incivility and all the polarization that we're feeling. Immigration, gun control, we just heard about that. Vaccines, mental health, reproductive rights, climate change, tobacco use, fentanyl use. These are all very challenging issues that take skills, communication skills and other skills to address these very problems that are scourging, a big scourge on our society. In our own community in San Diego, as an organization, we're dealing with a public health crisis. It's called the school to prison pipeline. And this problem doesn't just exist in San Diego, it exists throughout the country. What's happening is that young kids are finding themselves in the school to prison pipeline. They might be suspended or expelled from school. And what are they doing when they're not in school? They're just getting in trouble. I want to focus today on the third lever, which is the Juvenile Diversion Initiative. This is a program where youth that commit misdemeanors or even felonies, they're arrested, but rather than going through the traditional criminal justice system, they're sent to our organization as a form of community-led diversion. And what we do is when the youth comes to us, we do an assessment. It's really like a health assessment. We try to figure out what are the underlying factors that led to the youth committing this crime. I mean, kids don't just commit crimes. There's usually an underlying factor. So, is it substance abuse? Is it a mental health issue? Are they struggling in school? Once we are able to figure out what that issue is that's impacting the youth, we connect them with different organizations throughout the community. And once we stabilize them and help them to overcome their barriers, then we figure out what's their passion. Is it art? Is it science? Is it sports? Maybe it's auto mechanics. And then we connect the youth to those programs across the community. And if they are able to successfully go through that program, their record is sealed. Otherwise, if they were to have a felony charge, they never could get a job. So by sealing the record, they're able to reintegrate into society. And this program is really about taking a holistic approach. It's working with the criminal justice system, it's working with public health agents, it's working across society to deal with a very complex issue. Let me tell you a story about one of the young men that was in this program. He was a football star in high school. As a senior, everybody liked this boy because he was the star on the team. But you know what happened to him? The first game, he tore his knee, an ACL injury. His high school football career was over. All of a sudden, all of those friends that he thought were friends no longer connected with him. And he started to spiral downwards. And he started to drink. And he started to isolate himself at his house. Well, one day, while drinking, he decided to take his father's car for a ride. driving down the road, he got in a car accident, got arrested. That's a felony charge, drinking while driving as a youth. So typically, he would go through the criminal justice system. But instead, we use this integrated, holistic approach to address the issue. And the first thing we did is we connected him to a substance abuse program. And then we did a social emotional program where we connect him with other youth on a rock climbing program. And all of a sudden, his confidence level just began to grow. So it's this type of approach that we need to do, whether it's working with youth in the criminal justice system, or a fentanyl crisis or gun control, or whatever the public health issue may be, fighting tobacco use. It's this type of integrated approach across organizations, across public agencies and nonprofit organizations to address these most critical problems. I mentioned before communication. Dr. Fauci used listening as one of the key elements in the communication strategy. Today, I want to focus on 3 core elements: active awareness, respond respectfully, and troubleshoot together. Active awareness, one might think, let's be aware of everything around us. If you look around, am I actively aware? Perhaps. But what's really even more important is to look within. It's to be aware of yourself. It's to understand what are your biases. What are the stereotypes that you're thinking in your mind when you see someone in the community that might be struggling? So you take the instance of that young boy. If you come across him and you see he's drinking, he's not doing well in school, you think, well, perhaps the stereotype is maybe he doesn't care about school. Maybe he's just lazy. But in reality, that's not the case. We need to be actively aware. The second component is to respond respectfully. And everyone thinks to respond that you're actively speaking. But the real element of responding respectfully is the opposite. It's about listening, asking open-ended questions, engaging the community in the solutions. So you take the example of acknowledging someone after you hear them. You might just repeat what they said. That doesn't mean that you're agreeing with what they're saying. It just means that you're listening to what they're saying and they feel heard. There's another program that we do at the National Conflict Resolution Center. It's working with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And what we do with them is we serve as conflict coaches. So there's a lot of programs working with people experiencing homelessness. There's writing of resumes, financial papers. But what we're teaching is life skills, conflict coaching, how to navigate through really challenging conflicts. So one of our staff people was telling me this story where she was speaking with one of the individuals in a shelter and had a half-hour session with that person and said, I really want to get to know you. What are some of your needs? What are some of your desires, your wants? And the gentleman looked down and said, you know, I don't really have any needs. I don't really have any desires. And my staff person said, everyone has needs. We all have needs. Come on. What might be a need of yours? He says, you know, I really would like to have a little dog. You know, something that would really love me. Because I never feel like anyone really cares about me. And what our staff person was doing with that individual experiencing homelessness was really acknowledging their emotions, their feelings. And as soon as she was able to do that, all of a sudden that That gentleman, his face lit up. For the first time in many, many years, someone actually took the time and cared about him. That hasn't happened to him in a long time. The final piece of the art of inclusive communication is Troubleshoot Together. In this room, as agents of change, experienced public health champions that you are, you know probably many of the solutions that people are struggling through. You might have some of the answers to the issues of the individuals you're working with. But the key in working through these issues is to troubleshoot together. That is to engage the individuals in the community, to empower them to work through the solution together. And you do that through engaging them, through empowering them to come up with the solution. So that's what we did with that football player. You know, typically when someone goes through the criminal justice system, there's an attorney assigned to them and they go through the court. And I've watched them, the kids, they just sit in a chair, they're slumped down, attorney speaks in front of the judge, and the youth ends up in the criminal justice system in juvenile hall. He doesn't take any responsibility for the action that he's taken because he's not part of the solution. He's never been engaged. But in the program where we're working on juvenile diversion, we put the youth at the center of the solution. And by doing that, they take ownership. And by taking ownership, they're invested in their own solution. And so years down the road, you know, they have such a better opportunity not to recidivate because now they own it. They take responsibility, their head is held high, and they take responsibility for that action. And it's the same thing that Dr. Fauci was really doing as he was traveling around the country meeting with the AIDS victims. He was talking to them and asking them, you know, what are you feeling? Help me as a public health agent, as a public health champion, help me to figure out what the solution is. So I think if we remember these three principles, active awareness, respond respectfully, and troubleshoot together, along with the integrated approach, this holistic approach, we'll start to be able to have more tools to navigate through all of the public health challenges that you're dealing with every day, especially during this time of polarization, of this time of dysfunction. These are the types of tools that are going to help you get to the finish line. I've just had the opportunity today to just touch on some of these skills. Tomorrow at 2:35, my colleague Ashley Virtue with the National Conflict Resolution Center will be conducting a power session on the client connection. During that training, you'll be able to go more in depth in these skills and actually practice them, get your hands dirty. These are skills that are not necessarily, they might be intuitive, but yet actually putting them in action is what is so challenging. So at the end of the day with this conference, you have another day tomorrow, but if I can help just to provide a few tools as you're navigating through these most challenging public health issues, then together we'll be able to find a path forward. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all the best of luck.